sure which one it is here. I think it's one of these here. I think I did Lobo and Poca. Okay, there's just for statistical purposes. Shep was not a very large dog. His sire, Wolf and Sasquatch, was a humongous dog, gorgeous, gorgeous dog. He kind of looked like Karen's Adam looks like now. He's very, very similar, except just a few minor little differences, but very basically very closely to the same thing. Beautiful animal, over 30 inches. His litter mates were all over 30 inches. His half litter, which was the captain litter, which was half brothers, 3/4 brothers, because his dam was Mona, who was a Sabrina daughter. His sire was Shane, and captain was out of Sabrina and Shane. So we're talking very, very similar type breeding. They were all humongous in size. We bred him to Saber, which is a very large bitch. She was like 20.5 inches, I believe. And Shep was actually smaller than his dam because of the close inbreeding. Now, we went one generation above and beyond that. I bred Shep back to a Sasquatch daughter, who was a very small bitch. She barely made the minimum standard. You had to put them on their tippy toes to get the wicket on them to pass, in essence. I mean, they were really small examples of the breed. But they were great movers, and they had all these other attributes. And, of course, they were line bred on Sasquatch. And it was line breeding with some very good other process in there. When we bred the two small dogs together, we had giant dogs, which is I've seen consistently over the past 4 decades in my gene pool happening. I used to do a seminar on Faith, which was a 24-inch bitch, and I'd bring in her 32-inch son. You know, it's like, this little mama produced this big boy. But, of course, that big boy didn't produce big dogs. He produced smaller dogs. So it always skips a generation. That's what I find in the way our gene pool works. When we bred him, the two of them together, okay, we had 3 litters, I believe, of puppies, and they were all bigger than the parents. The bitches were bigger than the dam. Actually, some of the bitches were bigger than the sire. And the males were back to the Sasquatch size. Then one of the breeders decided to breed, with my permission. I mean, she wanted to test breed it, and I said, okay, let's see what happens. She bred the Shep's son back into the grandmother on the dam side, well, the mother on the dam side. So back, this dog was bred back to his granddam.
Yeah.
Right, and the puppies were extremely small. It was a very heavy inbreeding. As a matter of fact, the RC on this one is 48.49. So it's quite high, and we've got not very much homozygous. I mean, we just have it on the one dog, which is the granddam here. But because of her having been in there one time too many, in essence, all the dogs have been very small. Now, this particular breeder tried to pump back the size using the theory of, 2 small dogs can produce these big dogs, and bred to the Lassie line, which always was consistent in big dogs. And like I said, he was related to the line with all the giant dogs. He's a captain's son, which is 3/4 brother to Sasquatch and so forth. And all those dogs were little dogs. And they just kept going downhill. And at the same point, in the reverse, we've done very similar type breedings on this end. And when we outcross, we get our size back. So when we go out, you get it back. In the NBs, it's worked a little bit differently because Artus is so powerful because he's a line bred dog himself. So we're inbreeding 2 line breds. So you always have this little clashing going on. He's not heavily line bred, very mildly, but there's a slight line breeding going back in the 5th through the 9th generation, actually. And when we brought him in, we lost size in the 1st generation. But when we bred those dogs back, what we call NB2s now, it's just like woof, gigantic size all over again. So I think the hybrid vigor has really helped bring up the standard in what we're trying to do with the Shilohs. But I'm just kind of wondering if you've ever done any research. And back to the Matador, I went around the bunny trail here. And what would you consider a Matador, considering that every one of these dogs, this is every male used to sire a litter, more than 1 litter of puppies in the past decade in the Shiloh Shepherd world. And how many puppies, litters he's
In the
sired.
past decade, how many puppies did you produce total? Roughly.
Okay, there's the chart.
Okay,
I know we don't have a
can
total
add 'em
number.
up. Oh, okay, well, you can add it up. 150, there's 350, 500, 800.
Yeah, I was close. I estimated around 1,000. It might be a little more.
Yeah, 900. Yeah, maybe about 1,020.
Okay.
And he produced 20 litters, 7 puppies per litter. You guys average 20 times 7 is 140. He produced 14% of the total gene pool that you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's a matador.
Is it?
It's not the number of puppies that
It's
you
the
produce
percentage.
that counts. It's the influence that his genetic makeup has on the breed as a whole. He produced 14% of all your puppies.
Yeah. So that's a big chunk.
That's a big chunk. Yeah.
So we can list Bionic Black Smoke as a matador.
Yeah, and he clearly is, and these others probably are. The ones that have got 10 or 12 litters, there's 4 of those.
And how does
Trillium, I'm not sure what the call names are on these set of dogs, but any of them that are up around 10 litters are clearly matadors.
Right. Okay. This is Pax, and this is Sasquatch, Howell's Wolf, and Sask. Another big guys. Here's Lazarus, of course, and King Zeus, but that's a whole nother game. We won't go there right now. Anyway, that was part of a puppy mill program. Tribute to Sasquatch. He's produced a lot more puppies than the other registry. So we were still collecting statistics, but on that one. But the Shep statistics, so in other words, if we run every puppy PR report, we are capable of, by the way. Our database is set up so we can run every puppy this dog has ever produced with every bitch and run data on what kind of hips, so we can give you percentages of what kind of hips he produced, how many. We had one report here, I think. It will show you how many were dysplastic and how many had good hips and what their height was. I think I did a small LMI report here, because you get into this heavy stuff, you can't do this on camera by any means.
Yeah.
It would take you forever to get it done, but I think we have, and all this stuff is on the internet too, so we are very open about what we do. This is the kind of statistics, but this is just on one litter, but we can run this on every single litter, showing, who the sire was, who the dam was, when the puppies were born, how many puppies were in there, and then each puppy is listed, and you've got your information if it was male or female, height, weight, color, coat, hips, and so forth. Mm-hmm. Now, we did a complete rundown on everything that Shep has produced within our registry, and did the statistics on how many dysplastic versus how many borderlines, and we have actually breakdowns, and we did it on the generalized breed. We didn't run them on individual dogs. Mm-hmm. What could you do with that kind of information? Because we have the capability of providing you with it. It's the hip ratings for the whole breed overall over the decade.
What you could easily do is rate that set of 5 dogs for their value in production of normal hips.
Okay.
That kind of thing you can do. That's the advantage of a matador, is you can now compare those 4 dogs and make a decision on which one's best for hips.
Okay.
Now, there are other characteristics that you must consider if you elect to breed that dog. Hips are one trait, so it's the overall conformation of the dog. How does that dog fit with the bitch you're going to breed him to produce the kind of a dog you want? Is he going to have the right size? Is he going to have the right temperament? Those are other things that must be considered along with hips. Or you can get yourself into more trouble than it's worth to reduce the amount of hip dysplasia that you have. But it's relatively easy to rate those dogs since you have the data on them.
And we can actually do the genetic defect data as far as, how many of them have produced DPI, because we have, from the health survey, they listed the sire that produced the problems. So we can actually take the health survey data and connect it with the males that were used for producing these problems.
Yeah, you'd only want to do that, of course, if they filled that out knowing that was going to be done.
I think they did. They didn't give their name and address and information like that. We told them they could be anonymous in that respect, but to at least list the parents of the dog so the data can be applied to the parents for future research.
Yeah, so the question, I mean, one, it would be a great thing to do. It would be a great thing to do.
We can do it.
But you must be sure that the people that filled that out understood that that was
Right.
you know, because you don't want to violate anonymity, because the next survey they may not respond to you.
Right. Well, I think
You know?
the fact that we have such a closed, tight gene pool, and as you can see from our list of studs, you know, it's almost like everybody's interrelated to everybody anyway. So if we list that, you know, Shep produced this, and this, and this, nobody will know where that information came from and from what person, because, you know, 20 or 30% of the people have either Shep progeny or grand progeny and so forth.
Okay, but the issue is very straightforward. Then you can do some other things that are really beneficial.
Okay, well, that's what we were here for. We want to do all these things because we want a better breed.
I mean, let's take EPI, for example.
Right.
If Shep was bred and produced 5 cases of EPI, or however many he produced, I don't know how many, that would be maybe in 4 litters or maybe 1 case in each litter.
Right.
But remember then, he's test mated 15 other bitches.
Right.
So you can give them a clean bill of health if they had 7 puppies. Or a relative clean bill of health.
That's really what we want to go with this.
Yeah.
We really want to set up this program so we can do this, so we can almost start to identify our carriers just because of the data we've accumulated prior to and with the added health survey. And then hopefully as we progress with this, we're going to get more people to say, oh, okay, this is really a good thing. And they'll come forth and give us more information.
That's right. And if you view that in the right light, clearly you're benefiting Shiloh Shepherds as well as the owners of those bitches that have already bred to a dog. I mean, they're thinking nasty things because he produced EPI, and now they know that their puppies may be carriers, but he did some good things too. And our problem is we don't use the good information that he gives us. We don't use the fact that he test mated clean 15 bitches.
Right.
You know, and we need to use that. Because it allows us to localize the genes and allows us even, let's go down the road 30 years and say at this time we've got all defective genes in dogs identified so that we know what genes cause what, and we can tell you in your breed and in your dog what defects he has and what defects he doesn't have. So the question comes, how much money can you invest in a dog? If it costs $140 to test a dog for von Willebrand's disease, and that's the kind of prices that we're getting right at the moment.
Right.
Should you invest $140 to find out if your dog carries for von Willebrand's disease? And if we look at the 49 traits that Shiloh Shepherds have, if we test every dog, every Shiloh Shepherd for every trait, we're going to have $5,000 in the tests on each dog. You can't do that. That's not economically feasible.
I've got 52 dogs at home.
Well, and so what tracking genes does for us is tells us what gene is in your own dog's gene pool.
Right.
And you test specifically for the ones that are there. And you don't test for all the ones that can't be there, you know.
Exactly.
And so that's why that's the long-term benefit. And those long-term benefits in some breeds, you know, if they have a gene identified in the breed right now, should you test for that? And the question of whether or not you should test for it is that gene in your line?
Right.
If it's in your line, sure, it's a good investment. If it's not in your line, you're throwing away $140.
And
because the answer is going to be no, it's
Right.
not there.
And with the data that we have accumulated for all of these years, we should be able to get close to accurate. I mean, not counting, unfortunately, the dissidents that
Yeah. Well,
didn't provide the data.
Yeah.
But with those people that do care about the Shilohs and did provide and are working in this thing, we should be able to get how much of a percentage accuracy do you think?
Oh, you get if you track what happens to the dogs, to the puppies, now,
yeah.
and record it, you will get very accurate.
Well, that's what we plan to
Very
do from this
accurate.
day
You
forward.
know,
How long is it going to take us
you
from
know.
this day forward? Everything we have now, all the knowledge we have accumulated, and then going forth really full force tracking every single dog. How long before we get to the point where we really, really can say, we've got a full picture of what's in here?
It depends when, one, you can get your database set up to do it. That's going to be a big factor.
Well, we
That's
have the
gonna take
database right now. All we have to do is add one line for the genetic diseases.
Well,
we're
yeah,
going to
and,
just
and
add
you got to
two.
program the genetic diseases in there,
Right.
and
We want to have this all accomplished by the end of September. We have wonderful people
by
called
the end of September. Well, it's great if in fact you can do that, and
as long as Barbara's
I'll
not
be
doing
amazed.
something for the government someplace. And
Yeah,
she's a whiz at computers.
Yeah.
And I mean, she programmed, it's like a $40,000 program that she had done for
Yeah.
us 10 years ago when she set up the ISSR database.
well, I like to give her a little more time,
Well-
but I like the idea. If in fact you could do that in 2 generations, you could cut the amount of genetic disease in your breed in half in 2 generations easily.
Okay.
Easily,
And in 4, we should be home free.
yeah. And more importantly, it'll allow you to pick what diseases come through.
Right.
You know, I mean, every dog carries, on the average in your breed, 8 traits.
Right.
Okay. You may never be able to find a male that won't have at least one of those traits that a bitch has. Okay. But you can accept what you want to accept and reject what you don't want to.
So basically, when we get back to the inbreeding thing, where we stopped the tape quite a moment ago.
Yeah.
Gee, we get carried away, don't
Yeah.
we? Inbreeding is a wonderful tool, is what you're saying, used properly with this type of data behind it.
Of course.
Without
Sure.
this kind of data, you're spitting in the wind.
Well, yeah, of course.
That's what I figured.
Sure. I mean, that. Remember, keep in mind with the distribution of disease that we have in dogs, outcrossing in dogs from the standpoint of genetic disease is nearly as risky or as risky as inbreeding.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you don't know what you're doing with the
Yeah,
outcross. I mean,
yeah,
at least
yeah,
we
but-
know. I mean, that is true. We
you
know what we got here.
Right.
We know what
That's
we've got here.
That's exactly what the approach. And I gave in the seminar, if we looked further, I gave some examples of diseases that inbreeding has a lower risk
Right.
of causing that disease than outcrossing
Right.
at the present time. And there were like 4 or 5 of those that I use as examples, but you could have picked out, I think there are about 12 of them that really fit into that category, that have as high a risk of disease if you outcross as you do if you inbreed. And you can look at the table. It works out, you know.
Well, and this is one of the things, too, like with hip dysplasia. One of the things that I was very, very concerned when I was founding the breed, when I was actually working with it back in the 70s. Every time I brought in an outcross dog, because he had traits that I was looking for that was, phenotypical, basically, I brought him in. I was always worried about the hips, what his litter, because nobody tracked this information. You couldn't get this information.
Right.
And,
And not only that, it's now 20-some years later, you still can't get it.
I'll tell you.
I mean, that's basically it.
That you're right, but that's why I wouldn't go to a German Shepherd or a Malamute or any specific dog, because you can't get this information.
Yeah.
I've had people say, well, I've got this gorgeous dog. I really think you should breed him into the Shiloh gene pool. And I go, okay, I need 7 generations of LMX data on all of his background, including all of their litter mates, of course, and I want it documented. And they go, huh?
Yeah.
When you bring me that, we'll talk about it. The Altdeutsch, I have to mention this, the Altdeutsche Schäferhund people in Germany continue to do that because, of course, they're an offshoot of the SV. They just specialize in the long-haired version of the old-time, it's Altdeutsche, old-fashioned German Shepherd dog. And they did have that documentation. They've had, I went through quite intense documentation. They had all the litter mates. They had pictures of all the litter mates. They had x-ray reports on them. They had temperament reports on them. So they really, really were very, very intense in following this on a very small scale. But they also have a very, that's why we got together for a while, and then politics, of course, kind of got in the way. But I think it'll patch itself up eventually. But their gene pool is small, and they kind of like the idea of the Charlotte because they're going, oh, somebody else has done this too. So it's an exciting type of thing when you do run into somebody that has done it. And, of course, Joanne Chaney is another good example. I mean, this lady is a one-man show. For 40 years, she has been carrying on the hoof print line and documenting everything that's happening in her gene pool. So it is done here or there, very rarely. How do we get all these people to get together and say, come on, this is really the way we should all be doing it?
That's the difficult part. You need to convince them because in the situation that we're in if you were in Sweden or in Germany,
you have to.
You could give orders.
Yes.
Here
I give orders too now. They've learned their lessons.
Well, but now you have a splinter group.
Well, right? They're already splintered again and again. So
I know, but
thank God.
But in this country, I mean, we can't give those kind of orders. What we do, what I think, this is my belief. I think we have to lay the data out, show them how it works, and then prove that it works.
Yeah, and I proved
it works.
Right, and that's
the issue.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I tried to prove with the LMX program. I tried to prove, yes, it does work. Just give me enough rope to continue this program through, and I will show you that I will bring the incidence of hip dysplasia down in the German Shepherd. And of course, there's German Shepherd breeders that aren't too happy with me about it, but I did prove it, and we were consistently getting solid hips, and we were getting it in the beginning when I first opened up the Shiloh to the rare breed world, basically. And then, of course...
Well, your hips aren't bad now.
They're up to 11%.
But 11% is not bad for
but they were...
hips in a large breed, you understand that.
But to me, it is, because it's a rise of 9% in a matter of 10 years. Well, in a matter of 4 years, really. As I think we were running... And I will have TCCP run the data, but I think in the 95, if we ran all the data at that point, I think we were running like 4, maybe 5% at the most. Where in 89, we were running about 3%. And then from 95 to 2000, we've gone up to 11. So there's something sloppy happening here that's got to be fixed. There's a few leaks in the program. And we're working on getting them plugged in so we can go back down. You watch. Give me 3 generations, and we'll be back down to where it should be, down to 2 or 3% hip dysplasia across the board for every dog in this breed. Now, we can prove that. Can we use some of this data to kind of set off other clubs and say it can be done?
Well, sure, of course.
And same thing with the genetic diseases.
Of course.
We're going to lower our incidence.
I mean, there are good examples of situations in which a disease was controlled, sometimes by a club and sometimes by a group within a club. The Malamutes did it as a breed. They got rid of Malamute chondrodystrophy or Malamute dwarfism, whatever you want to call it. And that didn't take them long. In the process, they couldn't decide what they wanted to do with carriers, and that caused a huge fight within that club that I was disappointed to see happen because some people wanted to euthanize all carriers, and other people didn't want to euthanize all carriers. So that club never tackled another problem that I'm aware of as a club.
That's a problem with clubs because you've got politics and people, and I have found in the last 10 years since I've been involved with politics and people, I mean, I was involved in the German Shepherd Dog Club of America and things like that, but I didn't have all the power plays. I just had my fun thing. You know, I did my fun things. I didn't try to run the clubs. Boy, trying to, be involved heavily and be on the board of a dog club is like pulling teeth. You've got a bunch of kindergartners that all they want to do is squabble with each other.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And nobody
Oh, yeah.
knows what they're doing or why they're doing it, but they just want their own way. And it's a nightmare. I mean, you spend so much time, and accomplish nothing, and they all get offended and they leave. So I believe as far as dogs, Maxwell and Stephanie's had the right idea. The SV did it right. The breed was solid, and it flew. So this is kind of the format I'm going back to, and I think the Bibs understand this. And like I said, that contract that they drew up, they are the ones that pretty much set the standard for it.
That's a very interesting contract.
So, yeah, I'm very pleased with, they're going, no, we've got to get tighter about this, and we've got to get stronger, and they're going, and during the part, it was on the internet. It was kind of an interesting thing because I think Virginia saw it too. Because for a while there was a little bit of dissonance going on. One person had their ideas, another person came in with their ideas, and there was a little tiny bit of squabble coming in. And all of a sudden, one person came in and said, listen, this is Tina's breed. She knows what she's doing. She knows what's best for it. We all agree we have to have tighter rules. Let's stop bickering about this. And another person came in and said, yes, we sat our say, let her make the final decisions. And then several more came in and said, ditto, yes. Just let her.
Sounds a little bit like a marriage.
Yeah, and that's kind of how we have it's like a family. Yeah. This is Ma Shiloh. We are the children. We have our say, but Ma's got the last word. And, okay, we've said our piece. Give her a chance to do what needs to be done for the betterment of the breed because she's only got our interest at heart, for our future, for the dog's future. And that's what we're all here for. And it really went smoothly. It just went so nicely. And then I presented it to them. They went great. And it was just like, done deal. That was easy. Jeez, I've never been in a board meeting or a club meeting that was that easy. Yeah. I like my Bibs. Great people here.
Yeah. It's an interesting program.
You breed ugly dogs without expecting to get a lot of ugly dogs.
Yes.
The ability to transmit a trait, either good or bad, uniformly is called prepotency. If a dog throws his own...
is a recessive factor when we're dealing with homozygous effect. When you're getting into a higher inbreeding coefficient, and I know you're not really much into this type of programming, but as a separate tool along with what we're doing here, as a side tool, and I found it quite interesting because it shows on RCs that show a very high percentage of Sabrina that I feel that there's more risk of subaortic stenosis because I know she's a carrier. I mean, she has produced it. She's produced it consistently. We've gone 3 generations down the road and still seeing it pop up. And the heavier the inbreeding on her line in particular, the more probability that we're seeing across the board that it's popping back up again. So this is a concern of mine. And in one pedigree that I studied where it sprang up heavily, she showed up as being homozygous 9-point-something%. Most of the pedigrees, the RCs that we were running, we're seeing her 1-2%. It's not,
Okay.
Go.
Let me take the first point. What you're doing there is looking at the general breeding quality of the dog. It's not going to tell you much about a specific trait.
Right.
It generalizes. If you want to trace a specific trait, then you track that gene itself and calculate risk through each generation. Now, you said that Sabrina was in the pedigree 15 times.
Right. And
okay, but do you remember how I was calculating risks in the breeder pedigrees?
Right, and we have to learn this new system.
Okay, probably of the 15 times in influence on this new puppy, probably she would be chopped out 12 or 13 of those times and only have 2, one on each side, that really influences that trait in that set of offspring. Mm-hmm. Because we're talking about specific genes now, not the general characteristic of Sabrina. Sabrina is made up of 100,000 genes.
Exactly.
And so as those 100,000 genes come down through, each division is going to give you a separation of the traits. Mm-hmm. And so that gives you an estimate of the whole 100,000 gene makeup of Sabrina that's in this puppy.
Right.
It won't tell you about what happens to a specific gene. It won't
Right.
tell you that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I understand
And so you have, when you look at the 15, you're looking at the overall breeding quality of Sabrina. But if you want to find out about a specific trait, or 2 specific traits, or 4 specific traits, then you can't use that figure. You trace them and calculate risk, and you can do that.
Right, and
Specifically.
that's what we want to do because it is a cleaner system and it's less guesswork because in a lot of the RC programs that we're looking at, we're saying, okay, Sabrina, we know carries SAS. We certainly want to get rid of that. We don't want this in our line. This is a terrible thing. It's worse than hip dysplasia in my book, you know. It's more expensive to have open heart surgery than it is to have hip replacement surgery. You know, so if you had to have the two, and not to mention hip dysplasia, you have, you know, chemicals you can use and supplements and, you know, different things that can go along the way to, and dogs can live a perfectly normal life with it. If it's a mild case, SAS is dead, you know, it's instant death to the dog. There's no hope for it. So it's a very serious thing. We have to watch it. So when I'm looking at an RC program, I see that she is homozygous 9 point something in this program. She's in there 15 times in the first 5 generations. Am I taking a greater risk of pulling SAS through because she has such a high influence on this particular breeding? Wouldn't I be better off doing a line breeding on Carrie, but I know is not a carrier, has never produced it, none of her progeny, unless they had Sabrina in them, have ever produced it? See, this is the kind of way we're looking at this, saying, you know, if you have the two choices.
Of course, if Sabrina has produced it and she's in the pedigree, she's a higher risk than somebody that hasn't produced it.
Right. Well, they're all in the
Obviously.
pedigree. So that's a problem. Yeah. Everybody's in our pedigree. They're all in the same pond.
Sure.
It's how many times they show up and how far back they show up. Carrie shows up maybe 4 or 5 times, but back in the 7th through 9th generation, where Sabrina will show up 5 to 8 times between the 4th and the 6th.
But remember how genes work.
Oh, yes.
They must go through the parents.
Right.
And so what you really do is calculate the risk of the closest animal related to that dog, to the dog you're breeding.
Right.
That has Sabrina in it. And if she was in it 15 times in the background, you still calculate the risk here, and that's your starting point.
Well, that's what we're going to do.
And the more, of course, the more she's in the pedigree on both sides, the higher this risk will be. Because you add them together.
Right, because that's what we're seeing in some of the things that are happening. The dogs that have certain gene pools that they're pulling on are the ones that are having the most problems. Like EPI seems to be running in various lines, more so than others. You know, the SAS, of course, is running in basically 2 lines, but they're very closely related when it's not showing up in some of the others.
Of course, once you calculate Sabrina through that pedigree, I mean, Sabrina has that risk for every dog that she's in with a pedigree like that one. You don't have to do it for every pedigree once you do it for Sabrina.
Right, well, she's in every pedigree. That's the whole point. It's how many times she's in the pedigree. If she's only in there 3 times or she's in there 12 times. But there isn't a, well, except for the new bloods, very few of the new bloods. Actually, there isn't a Shiloh out there that doesn't have her in there. It's really strange because, for example, we went through the Matador list. Shep is her grandson. Okay. Or great-grandson, excuse me. Sasquatch was her grandson. Captain is her son. You know, all the dogs that, you know, we typically had right down the board are either sons or grandsons.
Of course, that, yeah. And you sound horribly worried about that. But remember, that's what happens in every breed.
I know, I understand that. But
that happens in every breed, and every breed has survived. You know, and so it's not horrible. Sabrina has strongly influenced what your dogs look like, obviously.
Well, hopefully not, because actually she was part subclinic. Cut that.
Well, I don't know why she was bred that many times then.
She shouldn't have been.
Oh, well, and slap somebody's hand.
Well, the problem, actually, I didn't say it before, but the RCs that I've been running, I've totally forbid it from happening. I told people can't have her more than 3 times in a pedigree. Just like with Samson, I limit those outcross genes that we are not fully familiar with to a minimal till we see what they're producing over a period of time. The situations that I'm showing you here was actually happenings, third generation happenings from some of the renegade groups that ran off with a little tiny bit of the gene pool, started inbreeding on it, saying, oh boy, we're going to get bigger, bigger, bigger dogs. And instead they've got much, much smaller dogs with no stops, and the terribly badly hooked tails, faded pigment. And those things are structural things. I can live with that. You know, it's the health issues that I can't live with. That's where, and the sass really bothers me. I mean, those heart defects really bother me when, you know, people wake up on Christmas morning and go downstairs to their kitchen and find their dog laying there dead. Yeah, I mean, that just shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, even hip dysplasia, you know your dog is developing a problem. You have time to deal with it. You don't have to decide today whether the dog is going to be put to sleep or not. I mean, there are options you can use that are not very expensive. There are options you can use that are more expensive. And believe me, I have spent 4 decades of my life fighting hip dysplasia, but I'm saying when you compare the two evils, forget it. I'll take a dysplastic dog over a SAS dog in a heartbeat. And this is one of the things that our VIB program, I think the first thing we want to totally eliminate from the G. We want to see zero.
Okay.
We just don't want to see it there anymore.